We're officially halfway through Season 1 of Servant, and so far I've loved how unpredictable the show is. Each week we get another piece to the puzzle, then attempt to put it all together, only for the next episode to deliver new information that challenges everything we previously thought. While we have a long way to go before understanding the full scope of what's going on in this story, we do have quite a bit to work with. I rewatched all 5 episodes and attempted to catch any clues I might have missed the first time through. In this video, we're going to do a deep dive into some of the show's themes, symbolisms, and theories. Is this going to be the key to figuring out what's going on? Well, probably not, but it's a lot of fun to try, right? A biblical story in a contemporary setting. The show is heavily centered around a biblical theme. In an interview about the show, M. Night Shyamalan touched on this idea. The idea of telling an almost biblical story, but do it in a contemporary setting, in one location, and you're interpreting everything, I loved that. He went on to talk about the concept of a biblical story set inside the confines of one house, and how that enhances the tension. I think about The Exorcist, that the story of humanity's soul versus the devil's, playing out in a room in Georgetown, is super powerful to me. If you look, you'll find plenty of biblical references in each episode. I found the food choices to be particularly interesting. The Old Testament's Leviticus and Deuteronomy specify foods that are considered unclean and thus should be avoided. These include rabbit, mussels, eel, and lobster. Episode 1. Sean prepares rabbit for a dinner with Dorothy. Episode 2. The main dish at Julian's birthday dinner are mussels. Episode 3. The eels are a big focal point. Episode 4. Sean makes lobster ice cream. Episode 5. The lobster ice cream nearly kills Olivia. While these foods are primarily prepared by Sean, we do see Dorothy cook the mussels in Episode 2. I believe that these foods are used to symbolize that, biblically, the Turners engage in sinful ways. There's an overarching good versus evil vibe brewing between Leanne and the Turners. While at first we get the feeling that Leanne is the dark outsider, a threat to bring evil into the house, recent episodes are challenging that notion. Could Leanne actually be a righteous figure, there to bring balance to the Turners' wicked ways? We truly don't know the full picture yet, but I like how the show will occasionally hint to this, like in Episode 2 when Dorothy tells Julian the girl is a godsend. Even the name Jericho has strong biblical ties. In the book of Joshua, there's a story of the city of Jericho and its impenetrable walls. I won't try to dig into the full details, but the story could be used to illustrate how complete faith in the Word of God can lead to a miracle. Is the show suggesting that Leanne's unyielding faith could have brought Jericho back from the dead? The cricket appearing to be resurrected in the final moments of Episode 5 seem to point to this as at least a possibility. Just a couple more observations while we're in this lane. I found it interesting that Leanne declines a drink from the Turners in Episode 1, but after some prompting, accepts one from Julian in Episode 2. He tempts Leanne, and she gives into the temptation. Is this a subtle hint that Julian is like the devil? Okay, maybe that's a stretch, but there does seem to be a darkness in Julian that's growing throughout the show. Alternatively, Toby appears to be a beacon of light amongst the others. Like I mentioned in the review for Episode 5, he's sweet to Leanne, and seems to genuinely care for her well-being. Let's quickly go back to the symbolism of food. Before Toby eats the eel in Episode 3, Julian arrives and locks him out. This causes Toby to avoid eating an unclean food. We do see him eat a cricket in Episode 5, but strangely enough, crickets are considered acceptable in the Bible. A dark twist on an old classic. Servant has also been pointed to as a modern, dark twist on the classic story of Pinocchio. The doll of Jericho seems to miraculously turn into a real boy, similar to the way Pinocchio turns from a wooden puppet into a real boy. Pinocchio at one point in the classic story abandons school to instead spend 5 months having fun in Toyland, where everyone plays all day and never works. This disregard of responsibility leads him to turning into a donkey as a punishment. Are Sean's splinters a metaphor for him turning from a man into a wooden puppet as punishment for his bad deeds? Of course, there's also the iconic talking cricket, who in the original version offers a warning to Pinocchio about his disobedient and hedonistic ways. Pinocchio doesn't care to hear this, and accidentally kills the cricket by throwing a mallet at him. The cricket then returns as a ghost, and continues to advise Pinocchio. In Servant, the crickets, and more importantly, one cricket, seems to gravitate towards Leanne. I wonder if this is to suggest that Leanne is similar to the talking cricket in the sense that she's come to the house to bring balance to the Turners' troublesome ways. Theory number 1, Jericho was never born. Let's discuss a theory that I've seen a lot online, which is that Jericho was never actually born. I'll admit, I never liked this theory very much. We know that Dorothy had 5 miscarriages before Jericho. If he marked the 6th, then why would it have so much more significance than the others? Why would they need the doll this time around if they've been down that road 5 times already? In my opinion, it makes more sense for Dorothy's psychotic break to come after she's finally had a child, only to lose him so soon after being born. Some people believe the wording of, "we lost Jericho at 13 weeks, is a bit odd, that it could have actually meant 13 weeks into the pregnancy. However, rewatching episode 3, I noticed what looks like a sonogram at the bottom of the frame. Sonograms are typically done around 20 weeks, and if it's actually a sonogram in the shot, then this adds to the evidence that Jericho was in fact born. I found it interesting that there's also a pacifier under the bed in episode 5. Theory 2, Sean or Dorothy, or both, are actually dead. The biggest issue with this theory is that Sean and Dorothy both interact with people in the outside world. I'll set aside Julian for these examples. There's evidence to suggest that Dorothy is in fact back at work and on the news. She interacts with a cab driver and Toby. The same can be said for Sean. He interacts with food delivery men, Roscoe, and Toby. To me, there's not much that suggests either of these characters are dead. The mysterious aunt. We don't know much about the details of Leanne's family. We believe that the Graysons in Wisconsin died in a fire, and of course, the grave of Leanne only leads to a ton more questions. Did Leanne survive the fire and fake her death? Did she steal the identity of this dead child? Was she brought back by a greater power for some purpose? There are a ton of questions we could ask, but we don't know the answer to most. In episode 5, when Wanda asks if Leanne comes from a big family, Leanne answers, "Just me." However, in the same conversation, she also mentions an aunt who had the book about World War II. She's never talked about her mother and father, but now we hear about an aunt. Later in episode 5, she again mentions an aunt when she tells Sean how her aunt believed crickets meant something bad was coming. This reminded me of something we heard during the pageant scene in episode 4. Dorothy mentions, "all the moms and aunts who traveled to be with their daughters today." I found this wording to be very interesting. Makes me wonder if the mystery of Leanne's childhood is somehow tied to this mysterious aunt. I know there is a ton more I could have tried to cover in this video, but I wanted to focus just on what has stood out to me so far through the first 5 episodes. If we missed anything important, let us know in the comments below. Special thanks to Anthony Devonti for telling us about the interview with M. Night Shyamalan. If you're interested in watching the full interview for yourself, and I recommend you do, I'll leave a link in the description below. I want to end this video by extending a huge thank you to everyone who's been watching and commenting on these videos. When my wife and I first started this channel in late November, we never expected this level of feedback in just a few short weeks. We can't thank you enough for watching and subscribing. We look forward to improving this channel every week and discussing this show and many more with you all. Thank you.